Hello, everyone. Can you believe it? It's already February, so I thought it was high time for another special weekend edition of Reading Russia. I'm recording this on the morning of Sunday, February the 1st. As of yet, no news from Abu Dhabi, where peace talks on Ukraine are due to resume later today. In a moment, I'll be looking at what last Friday's Russian newspapers were saying about the Russian economy. Then I'll play you a little bit of an interview that I recorded a few days ago with a newspaper owner and chief editor, Konstantin Rimchukov, about what Moscow is making of what Donald Trump has been doing this year. First, here's a photo. This is my front door. There it is. Well, it's there somewhere. Actually, there's been so much snow in Moscow the last few days that one night last week, when I came home from work, I had to clamber over this lot to get through the door. Now, from doors to documentaries, and I have a special announcement to make. On Monday, February the 2nd at 8 p.m. on BBC One, it's also available on iPlayer, and you can see a film that we've been shooting for more than a year for BBC Panorama. They've called it Our Man in Moscow. Basically, it's a year in the life of the BBC Moscow Bureau, a year in which Russia continued its war on Ukraine, and a year in which Donald Trump brought Vladimir Putin in from the cold with that Alaska summit. Now, in this film, not only do I talk about what it's like reporting from Russia, but I share some personal memories from the 1990s. I moved to Moscow in 1991 after graduating from university, and I was teaching English originally at the Moscow Machine Tool Construction Institute, but I always wanted to work in television. So I got a job in the evenings, just answering the telephone at CBS News in their Moscow bureau. The 1990s, of course, was a chaotic decade, right? After the collapse of communism, the fall of the Soviet Union, the start of very painful economic reforms, millions of Russians fell into poverty. But the one thing that many people had in the 1990s, and I remember this very clearly, was hope that all that Cold War era confrontation was behind us, and that from now on, Russia and the West were going to lock arms and be friends forevermore. And so many things happened in the 1990s to make me feel that way. I'll just give you one example. In the 90s, I worked with an amazing American cameraman called Victor Cooper, a real character from Texas. I could tell you lots of stories about Victor Cooper, many of which are connected with chicken, his favourite food. But the story I'll tell you is this one. When Victor's attachment in Moscow ended and he was going back to America, we decided to make him a goodbye video in the office. And I was given the task of going around trying to persuade Russian celebrities to take part in this video and wish Victor well on camera. And I can remember that all the main anchors of all the main evening news bulletins and all the main Russian TV channels agreed with pleasure to record sort of dummy news reports in their studios about how, breaking news, Victor Cooper leaving Moscow and going back to America. And also I remember how one of the biggest personalities on Russian television also agreed to interview a giant plastic chicken in his studio because we told him that chicken was Victor's favourite food. Such was the level of goodwill in the 90s between Russia and the West. Fast forward to today, and that's gone to a large extent. Switch on Russian state television today, and the anti-Western rhetoric is off the scale. And of course, Russian officials accuse the West of being responsible for the war in Ukraine, even though it was Russia that launched the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. So February the 2nd, Monday night, 8 o'clock, BBC One, this Panorama 1-hour special, Our Man in Moscow, also available on the BBC iPlayer. Okay, now time to read some Russian newspapers. These ones are from Friday, and there's a lot about the Russian economy in them. Kommersant. According to the assessment of Russian industrialists, the business climate in Russia continues to remain in the negative zone. In January, the Business Environment Index, calculated by the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs, declined for the second month in a row, Most of all, the overall indicator was influenced by the personal assessments of entrepreneurs, the situation in industries, in the B2G, business to government sector, and in the field of logistics. The survey of companies also recorded an increased determination to raise the cost of their products in response to higher purchase prices. The same paper also reports that for the first time in 25 years, the number of cars in Russia has gone down. You can see from the graph that the number of cars had been increasing since 2000. Not anymore. Moskovsky Komsomolets. Bad debts on mortgages up by 76.6%. Last year, mortgage arrears hit a record level in Russia, jumping by 76.6%. Also, 20% of the dairy products on sale in Russia are counterfeit. Izvestia, retailers have been warned about a 10 to 30% increase in the price of smartphones. Smartphone manufacturers have notified Russian retailers about a 10 to 30% increase in the price of their products. Gadgets purchased at the new prices will arrive in Russian stores in March to April. Now, the reason given is the shortage of memory chips, which are now being used in large volumes by AI services around the world. Instead of reporting on prices being put up, the ultra pro-Kremlin daily Komsomolskaya Pravda reports on a photograph being put up. The photo Vladimir Putin gave as a present to Donald Trump in memory of their historic meeting in Alaska has been hung in the White House in a prominent place. I'm sure Vladimir Putin will appreciate that, as he will no doubt be appreciating the obvious stresses and strains within the transatlantic alliance right now in relations between America and Europe, America and its NATO allies. For example, over Donald Trump's determination to take over Greenland. A few days ago, I spoke to Konstantin Remchukov. He's the owner and editor-in-chief of Nezavisymaya Gazeta. And I began by asking him how divisions in the West are being perceived in Moscow.
I think Moscow is pleased with all these events because from Russia's point of view, it is additional proof of what Russia said for the last several years. The world order established on the international law is over. With Trump initiatives on Greenland, on Venezuela, his promises to bomb Iran if there is a demonstration. And when he said that international law exists only within his morality, it is interesting and outstanding declaration because it is very good that something exists within someone's morality. The only question is what to do if there is no morality. Then it exists within the head of a person without moral, but with the overwhelming military power. It is the end of the world arrangements which we knew since 1945.
But a new world order that is not based on international law, that is based on the morality of one man, that is based on chaos and unpredictability, that's dangerous, isn't it?
Yes. Now we are living in a dangerous world. So a lot of tension is ahead. And
I read what I thought was an extraordinary article, not in your paper, but in the government paper this week, which was praising Donald Trump for what he was doing and almost encouraging him to go ahead and take Greenland and not do a U-turn because that would harm him politically, it was the argument. Why such an approach from Moscow? Why does Russia seem to be okay with the idea of Donald Trump taking Greenland?
I think because it's very simple. It is a very good example both to internal audience and external audience of opponents. You see, one country can take anything if believes that it is in their favor of their security. Why wouldn't we do the same if we believe that it is in favor of our security? We don't want Ukraine be a part of NATO. We don't want NATO missiles be very close to Smolensk and to Moscow. That's why we make what we do.
You say that Moscow is pleased with what's happening, but it looks as if Russia has been losing influence, geopolitical influence, over the last few months. In Venezuela, there was Syria as well, now that Assad has gone, losing influence in its own backyard, Armenia, Azerbaijan. To what extent has Moscow lost influence? And is that linked to the war in Ukraine?
I think yes, because concentration on Ukraine definitely requires all resources being directed there. But the status of the regional power or the world power forces all regimes in the world to continue to send messages that we are in control of everything. That was the same with the Soviet Union. Now it seems that we continue to send these messages to everybody. Yeah, Cuba, of course, it's our traditional, Venezuela, Syria, and then something happens. I think it is more inertia, because you have to have enough economic resources, financial resources, in order to be effective.
It occurs to me that if President Obama or President Biden had tried to go into Venezuela, there would be huge protests in Moscow outside the American embassy. Long reports on Russian state television slamming America. There's none of that here.
Not Biden, not Clinton, they never indicated that they could understand our concerns. Trump appears to understand concerns. Yeah. And that is the foundation of relationship.
Konstantin Remchukov. Well, that's all for this extra edition of Reading Russia. Thank you for watching it, and I do hope you'll be able to follow my reporting from Moscow next week on the BBC. Let's end with some music, because I do enjoy playing the piano. It really helps relieve the stress. Here's some Shostakovich and Snow. I play an extract from Dmitri Shostakovich's second piano concerto. Thank you for watching. Take care.